11. Black actors who hid. They were gay until the day they died. Hollywood's golden glow has always dazzled the world, but behind that glittering curtain lies a truth the industry never wanted you to see. For decades, some of its brightest black stars lived double lives, forced to hide who they truly were just to survive. They smiled for cameras, delivered iconic performances, and died with secrets they could never speak aloud. These are not just stories of fame, they are stories of pain, resilience, and silence. Before you look away, hit subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence, because what you're about to hear will change the way you see Hollywood forever. Alvin Ailey. Alvin Ailey's life was a masterpiece of both brilliance and restraint, a journey defined by art, courage, and quiet suffering. Born in 1931 in Rogers, Texas, he grew up amid the harsh inequalities of the segregated South. From those beginnings, he rose to become one of the most influential choreographers in American history. In 1958, he founded the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, a company that gave black dancers a platform rarely offered to them at the time. 2 years later, he created Revelations, a deeply spiritual and emotional work that continues to move audiences worldwide, celebrated as one of the most performed modern dance pieces of all time. Behind that triumph, however, lived a man carrying an invisible weight. Ailey was a gay black artist in a society that punished both his race and his identity. The entertainment industry and public life of his time were ruthless toward anyone who dared to live openly, especially those already facing racial barriers. He understood that revealing his truth might cost him his art, his reputation, and the community he had worked so hard to build. So he chose silence not out of shame, but out of survival. The emotions he couldn't speak were poured into movement. His choreography explored freedom, longing, love, and faith themes that mirrored his internal battles. Each performance was more than dance. It was confession without words, resistance without anger. Through his dancers, Ailey expressed the beauty and pain of a soul that longed to be seen for its entirety. His works were living proof that even silence can have a voice when expressed through art. Ailey also faced private struggles with mental health, enduring episodes of depression and exhaustion. Later in life, he contracted HIV/AIDS during a period when the disease was surrounded by fear and stigma. Even in his final days, he chose to conceal the truth, asking doctors to list another cause of death to protect his mother from heartbreak and public judgment. On December 1st, 1989, at the age of 58, Alvin Ailey passed away, leaving behind a world forever changed by his artistry. His company continues to thrive, carrying his vision of inclusivity and empowerment to new generations. His name has become synonymous with innovation, grace, and resilience. Yet behind that shining legacy lies a reminder of the silence forced upon so many artists who gave the world beauty while being denied the freedom to live honestly. Alvin Ailey's story is not only about dance, it's about endurance, the cost of genius, and the quiet strength it takes to hide one's truth in a world not ready to embrace it. His life remains a moving testament to how creativity can transform pain into timeless art, the rhythm of freedom echoing even in silence. Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin's story stands as one of the most compelling examples of brilliance lived under restraint. Born in 1912 in West Chester, Pennsylvania, he grew up in a world divided by both color and convention. A gifted thinker, singer, and performer, Rustin's early years were marked by his love for theater and music, but it was his devotion to justice that defined his legacy. Behind the public figure who helped shape the civil rights movement was a man burdened by a truth he could not openly share, that he was gay at a time when being both black and homosexual could destroy a career or a cause. During the 1940s and 1950s, Rustin worked closely with leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., introducing him to the principles of nonviolence that guided the movement. He organized protests, trained activists, and crafted strategies that changed the course of American history. Yet despite his brilliance, he was frequently sidelined. Many within the movement feared that his sexuality would be used to discredit their work. Even when he was the chief architect behind the 1963 March on Washington, the event that brought over 250,000 people to the nation's capital, Rustin's name was almost erased from public recognition. The pain of invisibility was a constant companion. Rustin lived authentically in private circles, but understood that public acknowledgement would come at a devastating cost. Arrested in 1953 on morals charges, he faced humiliation and career damage that haunted him for years. Yet instead of retreating, he turned his suffering into purpose, fighting not only for racial equality but also for workers' rights and global peace. His resilience was proof that conviction could outlast prejudice. As an actor and performer, Rustin carried an unmistakable charisma. He appeared in stage productions, sang spirituals with elegance, and used performance as another tool for expression and activism. Even so, he avoided the spotlight, channeling his energy into empowering others rather than elevating himself. Behind every speech and march was a man who gave his full heart to the world but kept a part of it hidden to protect the larger mission he served. In his later years, Rustin slowly began to speak more openly about the intersections of race and sexuality, though full acceptance was still far away. When he died in 1987 at age 75, he left behind a complicated yet inspiring legacy, a blueprint for courage in the face of silence. His life was one of contradictions, a man who fought for visibility but lived partly unseen, a hero who sought equality for all while being denied it himself. Bayard Rustin's story is not just about a hidden identity, it is about endurance, vision, and the quiet strength to keep building a better world even when that world refuses to embrace you fully. His name now stands as a symbol of truth, long suppressed, and finally acknowledged, a reminder that history's most powerful voices often spoke from the shadows. Juano Hernandez. Juano Hernandez's life was a testament to both artistry and restraint, a story of quiet perseverance beneath the glare of Hollywood's golden age. Born in 1896 in Puerto Rico to a mixed-race family, he rose from humble beginnings as a circus performer and radio actor to become one of the first Black and Afro-Latino men to earn major roles in American cinema. At a time when racial barriers were nearly insurmountable, Hernandez's breakthrough performance in Intruder in the Dust, 1949, made history. His commanding portrayal of Lucas Beauchamp brought dignity, pride, and humanity to a black character in a segregated America still steeped in stereotypes. Yet behind the applause and critical acclaim, Juano carried a private truth that could not be spoken aloud. In an industry obsessed with image, he was a gay man navigating a world where his race already marked him as other. The 1940s and 1950s were decades when exposure of one's sexuality could destroy a career overnight. For a black actor, the risk was doubled. He maintained an air of mystery, never speaking about his personal life in interviews, allowing his artistry to stand as his public face while keeping his heart shielded from scrutiny. Off-screen, Hernandez was deeply intellectual and reserved, drawn to literature, politics, and music. He found refuge in creative circles where acceptance was broader, yet even there he was cautious. Colleagues admired his discipline and grace but rarely glimpsed the vulnerabilities beneath. His silence wasn't cowardice, it was a form of self-defense in a time when authenticity could be fatal to one's livelihood. As his career matured, Hernandez took on roles in both Hollywood and international cinema, appearing in The Breaking Point 1950 and Trial 1955. Each performance reflected his quiet rebellion against the limitations imposed on black actors of his generation. He refused to play caricatures, choosing instead roles of strength and depth, infusing every line with pride and restraint. The emotional gravity he brought to the screen often mirrored his own inner battles, a man performing strength while concealing fragility. When Juano Hernandez passed away in 1970 at the age of 74, obituaries celebrated him as a trailblazer but made no mention of his sexuality. The world remembered the artist, not the man behind the artistry. It was only later that scholars and historians began to discuss the personal sacrifices he made, recognizing how silence was both his shield and his prison. Hernandez's story reminds us that Hollywood's progress was built on the quiet endurance of pioneers like him, men who carried their truth privately while transforming art publicly. His life stands as both a triumph and a tragedy, the triumph of breaking racial boundaries and the tragedy of never being able to live openly as himself. Juano Hernandez remains a symbol of integrity, proof that even in silence, authenticity can find a way to shine through. Geoffrey Holder. Geoffrey Holder was a man of endless dimension. Actor, dancer, choreographer, painter, director, and designer whose deep voice and larger-than-life presence made him unforgettable on stage and screen. Born in Trinidad in 1930, he began dancing in his brother's company before moving to New York City, where his talent quickly drew attention in the vibrant art scene of the 1950s. Towering at 6'6" with a regal bearing and a booming melodic laugh, Holder captivated audiences wherever he went. His performances in The Wiz and as the mysterious Baron Samedi in the James Bond classic Live and Let Die earned him international fame, but his artistry stretched far beyond acting, behind the flamboyant costumes and radiant charisma. However, Holder lived a private life that few truly knew. Those close to him described a man of immense sensitivity and depth, someone who navigated the tension between self-expression and social expectation. Though often associated with elegance and eccentricity, he was also a gay man, in an era when such an identity could derail a career. In mid-20th century America, and particularly in the entertainment industry, being openly gay was an invitation to scandal and exclusion. Holder, ever the consummate artist, allowed his creativity to speak where his voice could not. His art reflected a man who understood duality. On stage, he embodied joy, flamboyance, and freedom. Offstage, he guarded his private world with precision. Friends and collaborators noted that he rarely spoke about his personal relationships, focusing instead on his craft. He created bold choreographies and directed theatrical productions that celebrated life color and motion expressions of liberation that perhaps hinted at the freedom he could not fully claim in life. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Holder became a cultural icon celebrated for his grace and innovation. His work earned him 2 Tony Awards for direction and costume design for The Wiz, making him one of the few black artists of his time to achieve such recognition. Yet amid this success, he remained enigmatic. He cultivated an image that was magnetic yet untouchable, a brilliant creator whose personal truths were hidden behind art's brilliant veil. When he passed away in 2014 at the age of 84, the tributes poured in, honoring his genius, his humor, and his profound impact on theater, dance, and film. But even in death, the details of his private life remained veiled, a testament to the discretion that had defined him. His legacy was celebrated in color and sound, while the quieter truths of his identity remained known only to those who had shared his inner circle. Geoffrey Holder's story captures the paradox of many great artists of his generation, men who broke creative boundaries, yet were constrained by social ones. His life reminds us that brilliance often comes from the balance between revelation and restraint, and that even when words fail, art can still tell the truth. Through his work, Holder achieved a kind of immortality, a life lived in vivid color even when some colors had to remain unseen. Tommy Lane. Tommy Lane was one of those unforgettable screen presences, sharp, confident, and effortlessly cool. Born in Miami, Florida in 1937, he emerged during the explosive 1970s era of blaxploitation cinema, when black actors were finally beginning to claim powerful roles on screen. His tough demeanor, striking looks, and natural swagger made him a perfect fit for the gritty, action-filled films of the decade. Most audiences remember him as the smooth yet menacing henchman Adam in the James Bond film Live and Let Die, 1973, or as the street-smart villain in Shaft, 1971. Tommy Lane's performances radiated strength and danger, the kind of masculinity Hollywood demanded at the time. Yet behind that cinematic image of toughness was a man who lived quietly with a truth that could not be spoken. Lane was gay, but like many of his peers, he kept this part of his life hidden to protect his career. In the 1970s, being both black and openly gay in Hollywood was professional suicide. The industry, though glamorized for its freedom, still clung to rigid stereotypes of what a leading man should be. Lane understood this cruel paradox that the very image that made him successful would also make it impossible for him to live authentically. Off-screen, he was known as introspective and private, preferring to let his work speak for him. Friends described him as disciplined, loyal, and deeply serious about his craft. He rarely gave interviews and almost never discussed his personal life. For a man who played loud, forceful characters, his real nature was gentle and observant. The duality of his existence, the fierce exterior and the quiet inner world, defined both his art and his humanity. As his career continued, Lane appeared in television shows and smaller film projects including Cotton Comes to Harlem and Seamus. Though he never reached household name status, he earned respect as a reliable and commanding performer, one who gave every scene gravity and charisma. Still, Hollywood's limited vision for black actors kept him confined to typecast roles. His private truth remained carefully shielded, preserved in silence, as the world celebrated only one version of who he was allowed to be. In his later years, Lane stepped back from acting, living a low-profile life away from the spotlight. When he passed away in 2021 at the age of 83, tributes from fans and colleagues honored his contributions to an era that helped redefine black cinema. Few, however, knew the full story, the personal sacrifices behind his professionalism, or the quiet courage it took to maintain dignity in a world that demanded conformity. Tommy Lane's legacy is one of strength layered with silence. He embodied the contradictions of his time, a man who played fearlessness on screen while living cautiously behind it. His story reflects the experience of countless artists who carried their truth in the shadows, proving that sometimes the most powerful performances are the ones the world never sees. Jimmy Daniels. Jimmy Daniels was a man of elegance, charisma, and quiet revolution, a performer who embodied the spirit of the Harlem Renaissance while navigating a world that refused to accept all of who he was. Born in 1908 in Laredo, Texas, and raised in Kansas City, he came of age during one of the most vibrant periods of African-American artistic history. When he arrived in Harlem in the 1920s, the neighborhood pulsed with creativity. Poets, musicians, and dreamers reshaping black identity through art and performance. Daniels fit seamlessly into that world. With his rich baritone voice and polished stage presence, he became a beloved cabaret singer and entertainer, performing in elite clubs like the Hot Cha Bar and the Cotton Club, where his sophisticated style captivated audiences. Behind the spotlight, however, Jimmy Daniels lived a carefully concealed truth. He was a gay black man at a time when both his race and sexuality placed him at the margins of society. Within Harlem's artistic circles, queerness was often an open secret tolerated in private but condemned in public. Daniels understood this double standard and crafted a persona that balanced allure with discretion. On stage, he was smooth, confident, and impeccably dressed. Off stage, he guarded his personal life with quiet precision, sharing his love and heartbreak only with a trusted few. Daniels' career thrived across decades. He toured Europe in the 1930s, performing in Paris and London, where he found slightly more freedom to express himself. There, he mingled with expatriate artists and intellectuals, including Josephine Baker and Langston Hughes, both of whom admired his grace and artistry. Yet even abroad, the world was not entirely kind to men like him. He knew that being openly gay could mean the end of his career, a loss not only of fame, but of livelihood in an era that equated queerness with scandal. During the 1940s and 1950s, Jimmy Daniels became known not just as a performer, but as a cultural figure. He opened the Jimmy Daniels Club in Harlem, a space that welcomed some of the most brilliant artists of the day. His club was elegant and inclusive, offering a rare sanctuary for musicians, actors, and writers who sought community in a segregated America. Still, Daniels remained deliberately ambiguous about his personal life, avoiding interviews that strayed into private matters. As the years passed, Daniels continued to perform, though his fame gradually dimmed with the decline of Harlem's golden age. Yet his influence endured in his artistry, in the sophistication he brought to black cabaret, and in the quiet courage with which he lived his truth. When he died in 1984, obituaries remembered him as a charming and pioneering entertainer, but omitted the fullness of his identity. Jimmy Daniels' story is one of brilliance restrained by prejudice, a reminder of how many artists had to choose survival over openness. He sang of love on the stage, but could never freely live it off stage. His legacy endures not only in his music, but in his defiance. A black man who, despite the silence forced upon him, left behind a legacy of beauty, dignity, and unapologetic grace. Moses Gunn. Moses Gunn was a towering figure of American theater and film, a man whose voice could command a room and whose performances carried the weight of centuries of struggle and resilience. Born in 1929 in St. Louis, Missouri, he rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most respected black actors of his generation. A classically trained performer, Gunn's talent was shaped on the stage long before Hollywood came calling. He studied drama at Tennessee State University and later co-founded the Negro Ensemble Company, a groundbreaking institution that gave voice to black playwrights and actors at a time when mainstream theater excluded them. His presence on stage was magnetic, a fusion of intellect power and quiet dignity. To the public, Moses Gunn was the embodiment of strength. His commanding roles in films like Shaft 1971, Ragtime 1981, and The Never-Ending Story 1984 made him instantly recognizable. On television, he brought depth to every character he played, from Roots to The Cosby Show. His resonant baritone and calm authority often cast him as leaders, warriors, and men of conviction. Yet beneath that image of power lay a man carrying a secret, one he could never safely share. In an era when being gay could mean the end of a career, particularly for a black man, Gunn chose discretion over revelation. Hollywood, even in its supposed liberalism, demanded conformity. The archetype of black masculinity that the industry embraced left no room for vulnerability, tenderness, or difference. Gunn understood this deeply. While his art allowed him to explore complex emotions, his personal truth had to remain hidden. Friends and colleagues described him as intensely private, never one to discuss relationships or personal life. Behind his steady composure was a quiet solitude, a discipline shaped as much by fear of judgment as by commitment to his craft. Despite the walls he built around his private world, his performances spoke volumes. Gunn's portrayals often hinted at the inner turmoil of men burdened by circumstance, figures of authority carrying unseen pain. His stage work, particularly in Shakespearean roles, revealed a depth of feeling that transcended typecasting. Audiences saw the strength. Few recognized the cost of maintaining it. The same society that applauded his brilliance demanded his silence. As the years passed, Gunn continued to work tirelessly, earning accolades and admiration from peers across generations. Yet when he died in 1993 at the age of 64, obituaries praised his achievements without ever touching the truth he had kept veiled. The man who gave voice to so many silenced characters had himself lived in silence. It was not shame that kept him quiet, but necessity, the unspoken rule of survival in an unforgiving industry. Moses Gunn's story is both powerful and poignant. He was a trailblazer who broke racial barriers in theater and film, yet his personal identity remained confined to whispers and speculation. His life reflects a broader truth about the countless artists who transformed culture while being denied the freedom to live fully. Gunn's legacy endures not only in his remarkable body of work, but also as a reminder of the quiet heroism of those who dared to exist authentically even when they could not be seen. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross was more than a singer. He was a voice that defined love, longing, and vulnerability for generations. Born in 1951 in New York City, he grew up in a home where music was both refuge and language. His talent emerged early, and by his 20s, He had become one of the most sought-after background vocalists in the industry, lending his smooth, angelic tone to artists like David Bowie, Diana Ross, and Roberta Flack. But it wasn't until the 1980s that Luther truly stepped into the spotlight as a solo artist, capturing the world with his velvet voice and heartfelt storytelling. Songs like Never Too Much, A House Is Not a Home, and Dance with My Father made him one of the greatest soul singers of all time, a man whose music gave voice to emotions too deep for words. Behind the microphone, however, was a man who carried a heavy silence. Luther Vandross was a gay black man living in an era when being open about sexuality could mean the loss of fans, contracts, and acceptance. The R&B and soul world of the late 20th century celebrated romance and masculinity, but only in its most traditional forms. For Vandross, coming out publicly was not an option. He feared that audiences would stop hearing his voice and start judging his truth. So he poured every unspoken feeling into his songs: love, desire, heartbreak, and hope, crafting lyrics that spoke to universal emotion while masking his personal reality. Those who knew him privately described him as kind, witty, and deeply sensitive. He was also intensely private, rarely appearing in public without a polished, composed demeanor. In interviews, when asked about marriage or relationships, he would skillfully change the subject. His close friends and collaborators, including Patti LaBelle and Dionne Warwick, later confirmed that Luther had struggled with loneliness, yearning for love, but unwilling to expose himself to the world's scrutiny. His silence wasn't rooted in shame, but in fear of losing the career he had worked his entire life to build. As the years went on, the price of that silence became clearer. Behind the glamour and fame, Vandross faced isolation and health challenges, including complications from diabetes and hypertension. He continued recording and performing until a stroke in 2003 left him unable to return to the stage. When he died in 2005 at the age of 54, tributes poured in from around the world, celebrating his unmatched talent. Yet even in death, the full truth of his identity remained carefully shielded from public acknowledgement. In the years since, his legacy has been re-examined with tenderness and respect. Fans and historians alike have recognized the quiet courage it took for a man like Luther Vandross to thrive in an industry that demanded silence about who he really was. His artistry transformed pain into poetry, giving the world music that transcended barriers while reflecting the inner life of someone forced to hide his own truth. Luther Vandross's story is not just about love songs, it is about the longing behind them. His voice carried the ache of secrets, the beauty of restraint, and the resilience of a man who gave everything to his art, while protecting the one part of himself the world was not ready to see. His music endures as both a gift and a quiet confession, a timeless reminder that the truest stories are often sung, not spoken. Raymond St. Jacques. Raymond St. Jacques was a pioneer whose career blazed trails for black actors in American television and film. Born in 1930 in Hartford, Connecticut, he came of age in a nation still bound by racial division, but determined to carve his name in the arts. After studying drama at the University of Connecticut, he began performing in theater before transitioning to film and television. His rise to prominence in the 1960s and 1970s was groundbreaking. He became one of the first black actors to appear regularly in a primetime TV series, starring in Rawhide alongside Clint Eastwood, and later making his mark in Cotton Comes to Harlem, 1970, and Book of Numbers, 1973. On screen, St. Jacques projected authority, intellect, and dignity, rejecting the stereotypes that Hollywood often imposed on black men. Behind the scenes, however, his life was far more complex. Raymond St. Jacques was a gay man in an era when being openly homosexual could instantly end a career. For black actors who were already fighting for visibility and respect, the stakes were even higher. He built his reputation around discipline and restraint, presenting a poised, masculine image that aligned with the roles he played. Yet this carefully curated public persona masked the truth of a man who longed to live freely, but understood that openness could destroy everything he had built. Friends and colleagues described him as reserved but deeply thoughtful, someone who poured his emotional energy into his craft. He avoided gossip and public scrutiny, rarely attending Hollywood's social gatherings unless they served a professional purpose. In interviews, he focused on his art and activism, often discussing the importance of Black representation on screen. That focus was both a shield and a statement, a way to control the narrative in a world eager to define him. As his career flourished, St. Jacques also became a mentor to younger Black actors, emphasizing professionalism, education, and self-respect. His performances were layered with quiet intensity. Whether playing a detective, a preacher, or a father figure, he brought emotional gravity and complexity. His work helped dismantle Hollywood's narrow view of what Black actors could be, proving that they could embody not only strength, but nuance and sensitivity. When he passed away in 1990 at the age of 60, tributes celebrated him as a barrier breaker, but made no mention of his sexuality. Like so many of his peers, St. Jacques lived in a time when silence was survival. The truth of his private life remained unspoken, known only to those closest to him. His story of achievement shadowed by concealment mirrors that of countless artists who gave the world beauty but were denied the right to live openly as themselves. Raymond St. Jacques' legacy is one of progress and quiet endurance. He opened doors for Black performers across film and television, his presence commanding respect and changing perceptions. Beneath his polished exterior was a man who bore the cost of invisibility with dignity. His life reminds us that history often celebrates the victories of the visible while overlooking the courage of those who fought their battles in silence. Howard Rollins. Howard Rollins was one of the brightest lights of his generation, a gifted actor whose talent promised greatness, yet whose life was shadowed by inner turmoil and unspoken truth. Born in 1950 in Baltimore, Maryland, Rollins grew up in a working-class family with dreams far bigger than his surroundings. After studying theater at Towson University, he began his career on stage before breaking into television and film. His rise was meteoric in 1981. His performance as Coalhouse Walker Jr. in Ragtime earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor and a Golden Globe nod, marking him as one of Hollywood's most promising young Black stars. His charisma, emotional depth, and unmistakable presence on screen made him unforgettable. Yet behind that brilliance was a man quietly carrying the weight of secrets and personal demons. Rollins was a gay man in an era when being open about sexuality, especially as a Black actor, could mean instant professional exile. The entertainment industry celebrated him publicly but would not have forgiven such honesty. He lived within the confines of expectation, forced to portray strength, masculinity, and control while hiding the vulnerability of his real identity. His silence was not weakness. It was the price of survival in a world that wasn't ready to accept all of who he was. As the 1980s progressed, his private battles began to spill into public view. Struggling with addiction and depression, Rollins found himself facing multiple arrests for drug possession and other legal troubles. The tabloids pounced, branding him difficult and unpredictable. But behind the headlines was a man in pain, one trying to navigate fame, internal conflict, and an industry that offered little compassion for Black actors facing personal crises. Friends and colleagues later recalled his warmth and generosity, describing him as both deeply sensitive and intensely private. Despite these challenges, Rollins's work never lost its brilliance. His role as Virgil Tibbs in the television adaptation of In the Heat of the Night showcased his commanding intelligence and subtle emotional range. Week after week, he brought depth to a character who mirrored his own contradictions, dignified, proud, and quietly fighting an invisible battle. Off-camera, however, his struggles persisted. His perfectionism combined with self-doubt and societal pressures created a storm he could not fully escape. In 1996, at just 46 years old, Howard Rollins died from complications related to lymphoma. His death shocked those who knew him, marking the tragic end of a life that had burned brightly but too briefly. In the years since, his legacy has been re-examined with empathy and admiration. He is remembered not just as an actor of immense talent, but as a man who lived with courage in silence, a reflection of the countless artists whose personal truths were suppressed by the fear of rejection. Howard Rollins' story remains both inspiring and heartbreaking. He was a pioneer who brought humanity to every role, challenging the industry's limited perceptions of black men. His life reveals the painful intersection of race, fame, and identity, and the toll it takes when the world demands you hide your true self. Though his time was short, his impact endures, reminding us that genius often comes from those who suffer quietly behind the curtain. Paul Winfield. Paul Winfield was an actor of extraordinary depth and grace, a man whose performances brought truth to every role, even as he kept part of his own truth hidden from the world. Born in 1939 in Los Angeles, California, he rose to prominence at a time when Hollywood offered few meaningful roles to black actors. His breakthrough came in 1972 with Sounder, a powerful Depression-era drama that earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, one of the first black men to receive such an honor. With his eloquent speech, soulful eyes, and emotional precision, Winfield had a gift for portraying humanity in its most raw and honest forms. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Winfield became one of the most respected actors in both film and television. His performances in A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich King and The Terminator showcased his remarkable range from heartfelt vulnerability to commanding authority. He earned 2 Emmy nominations, and in 1995 finally took home the award for his portrayal of Martin Luther King Jr. in King. To audiences, he was the epitome of professionalism, intelligent, articulate, and always in control. But behind the public image of confidence and poise, Winfield carried a private truth that few knew. He was a gay man living in a world that still punished such honesty. Hollywood during his prime was not a place that welcomed openly gay black men. Coming out could mean career suicide, lost roles, and public ridicule. Winfield, who valued his craft above all, made the difficult choice to live discreetly. He shared more than 2 decades of his life with his long-term partner architect, Charles Gillen Jr., but their relationship remained largely out of the public eye. Friends and colleagues knew of their devotion, yet Winfield never spoke of it in interviews. His silence wasn't denial, it was protection. Those close to him described him as deeply thoughtful, even philosophical, about the limitations imposed by society. Rather than confront those barriers directly, he confronted them through his art. In roles like Nathan Lee Morgan in Sounder, he channeled the pain, dignity, and endurance of men forced to bear invisible burdens, reflections of his own experience. His characters were often men of quiet strength, revealing emotion only when it mattered most. Through them, Winfield communicated what he could not say aloud. When Charles Gillen passed away in 2002, Winfield was devastated. 2 years later, in 2004, he himself died of a heart attack at age 64. After his passing, many tributes honored his artistry, while friends gently confirmed what had long been an open secret, that Paul Winfield had lived as a proud, loving gay man, though never publicly acknowledged. Paul Winfield's story is both triumphant and tragic, the story of an artist who gave everything to his work, but had to hide a part of who he was to survive. His legacy reminds us that courage does not always take the form of confession. Sometimes it is the quiet resilience to keep creating beauty in a world that refuses to see you fully. Through his performances, Winfield found a way to speak his truth not in words, but through the power of art that endures long after silence. Paul Winfield's story is both inspiring and haunting, a reminder of how brilliance often comes with sacrifice. As one of Hollywood's finest black actors, he gave voice to characters filled with heart pain and strength, even while concealing his own truth. His life invites us to reflect on the cost of silence and the courage it takes to live authentically in an unforgiving world. At Legends of Black Excellence, we celebrate his legacy. But we also ask how many more extraordinary talents were forced to hide their light behind fear. Maybe it's time we finally let every story be told.